I'm going to do a philosopher as the dark dawn rises. It will rain later. Who I don't get on with at all. Really at all. I used to summarise his great philosophical works in 3 sounds. Oh! Ah. Hegel, I mean. The romantic philosopher who died in 1830. Absolutely brilliant mind. Writes impenetrably. And I've just never got on with him. I much more prefer Kant. And I don't, although Hegel has a much celebrated by himself critique of Kant, it misses the point for me. Anyway, that's beside the point. He is very good at locating 1 or 2 problems in modernity, which I might be able to do some other way. I will try over the week to do them with Spinoza. But I think Hegel will give you the best overview of a particular problem. So that's what we're going to go in today. First, to remind you about Hegel. Hegel is the great philosopher of the dialectic. So the dialectic is something that has actually cursed political life for 200 years. It's the idea that once you define something, you also define something that it is not. If I am me, then there is another out there. And the two then enter into some sort of relationship because you can't separate yourself from your other, your ego from your shadow, if you like. And that truth and happiness lies in reconciling them, but that in each reconciliation will lead to a further differentiation. And so Hegel will, in the history of the Geist, in the philosophy of the Geist, take you on a wonderful adventure, an odyssey, from the smallest human perception of a microbe to the realization of the Godhead. It's very beautiful in a sort of a way, as long as you like your beauty wordy and philosophical. And it curses modern politics, before I carry on, for a very straightforward reason. This is why centrists feel that they ought to be in power, and also really why the wealthy back them, or have done up to now. They're now shifting to the far right. Because they will say, there's the left, there's the right, we must be best because we are the reconciliation. In France at the moment, Macron is claiming yet again he's going to form a government that will take together the 2 polar opposites of the RN and the left, and somehow find a way to muddle through and link the 2 together. And there is this idea that all the people want is for politicians to agree and move on. Well, maybe we don't. Maybe just we don't. Maybe the left are right, but that's a different issue. Right. What is it then that Hegel allows you to understand beyond the curse of centralism? Hegel is the great philosopher of the problem of how do I think with what is certainly already thinking. You see, to be a me, to form a self, is to form a self inside a brain that is already perceiving things, that as far as you're concerned can already walk, that is full of endless little passive syntheses, little journeys, into interactions with the world, learning to speak, learning causality perhaps, through which you have already become what you are. You are already then in a mind that understands a world, that is understanding a world, before you ever claim it for yourself. For Hegel, this is the great Geist, the great one spirit. Once you have reason, he would say, reason is my reason and it is your reason. Oh, it is given only as it exists in our head. That is true enough. But as it is reason, it is universal. It is in all heads, understanding all thoughts in the same way. So we are all truly part of something greater, the great spirit, in which we perceive a world, but in which we understand the world. And the final end of human history will be the moment that Hegel realizes that. He realizes that thought and perception are ultimately to be reconciled in the Geist that is both individual and many. All right, you might get why I don't like him. But what has that got to do with you? Well, in raising this question, what Hegel is effectively asking you is, how do you think with what is already very much thinking? And in a very dark way, this is surely the greatest problem of our times, understood in a strangely Hegelian way. You see, we're slipping into a world, I suppose you might call this the world of AI, but I would certainly call it the world of artificializing intelligence, where an awful lot of our thoughts are given to us already on the move, already thinking, already dancing to different agendas. Now, you could say, has this always been the case? Well, maybe. But there was a kind of a tradition with those awful ideas such as memes, that they weren't so much thoughts that we shared as the antidote to thought. Oh, I know some people love the idea of memes, but I've never understood it myself. Because if you're saying that what gets passed on is a little moment, a little idea that can get passed between minds, it's not really an idea of reason. It's not a thinking idea. It's just an image, a joke, a thought that can go from me to you, a mannerism that you can copy, a little imprint on the brain, as it is first introduced in extended phonotype. Well, that's not thinking then. Certainly, Hegel would have a lot of very, very hard things to say to that. Closer to what I mean is, of course, advertising, which hands on a sequence of moves of the mind. And that's closer. But AI, even if it doesn't think, in presenting something very similar to thought, is going to change how humans understand what it is they are doing when they are thinking. Because AI doesn't ask you, it demands that you're part of some sort of greater consciousness. I mean this ironically, I think, because it's hardly conscious. But what I mean by that is that if you are an artist, if you make stuff, if you're a storyteller or an image maker, all the images you now put on the web will be stripped by AI and used by it to learn about its world. Effectively, then, you have become one of the perceptive eyes of a greater intelligence that will then feed back the idea processed as you search for it, as you look for it, as you try to mold your mind using the knowledge base you can get to, and give it to you in lots of different ways. You're living in a world, then, where everything that you do is already dancing, thinking, on the move. And that's going to change how you have to understand what it is to be thinking for yourself at all, in a very un-Hegelian way. At least I hope it is. Because you have to take an attitude, you see. You could follow Heidegger, and Heidegger, which is the one I would most follow, or Hume, which is the one I've developed a few days ago, is the idea that actually computers are not the same as the human experience and never will be. And that is true. And yet there's a bit where ideas that are abstract, in me or in AI, might end up, if I change myself, for I am very flexible, absolutely you might not be able to distinguish them very well. And suddenly, of course, you're caught up in somebody else's thoughts. The danger always with AI is that the thoughts are being generated by very wealthy men for their own benefit, which is absolutely true. And so you are then thinking their thoughts. What Hegel offers then, perhaps ironically, is an alternative. What the Geist ought to be is human reason thinking itself. What it's going to end up, unless we're careful, is that it is computers thinking us. It's going to be a very complicated set of moves that would ever be able to take you back to the Hegelian dream. Perhaps we can't now do it, but we ought to be aware that entering into a dark Geist, a world where computers think us, our very individuality, which for Hegel was rooted in a human reason, clearly comes under question, under suspension. What it is to be human is on the move, because what it is to have our minds is on the move. It is becoming unhuman. If you like, living through the end of Hegelianism, the end of the triumph of the human mind as reason alone, is likely to be an uncomfortable experience that we'll never forget, at least.